Good morning, and welcome to the session at the AI Finance Summit, a part of the virtual AI Summit New York. My name is Max Smolax, editor at AI Business, the online publication dedicated to artificial intelligence. I will be introducing our panelists today and asking a few questions. In this session, we're going to talk about the future of the finance industry and the role artificial intelligence will play in its transformation. Joining us for this conversation are Adri Purkayas-Ta, Global Head of AI and Digital Risk Analysis at BNP Paribas, John Almasan, AVP and Head of Advanced Analytics at Nationwide, Roey Mechrez, I'm sorry if I'm butchering this, CTO and Co-Founder at BeyondMinds, and Manuel Proessl, Head of Predictive Analytics at UBS. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max.
Yes, we'll probably start with short introductions, and I would just ask you to talk a little bit about your career. I mean, how did you first start with AI? And I think if we could begin with Adri.
Thank you. So 10 years back, I started a company which was to record lectures and from when I was at university and let the world take the lectures. So to solve the problem of automatically tracking professors, because I thought that getting a person to record the videos would be expensive. So that was the start of AI. I was doing some machine vision problem to solve the problem of the business. That's how I got to AI.
Okay, and John, could you tell us about your start with AI?
Oh, certainly, yes. My AI journey started a while back. I was a young boy when I fell in love with math. And then later on, I went to school and I started to learn statistics, and later on I learned coding. And that's how I started to actually, the core features or the characteristics of a data scientist or an AI engineer are math, statistics, coding, and certainly hacking, the ability of blending all this together for delivering a solution for a business problem. So in my early beginning as an engineer, a software engineer, and a statistician, I always look into finding opportunities on binding together the data and looking at the numbers in ways by leveraging another layer of statistical modeling on top of this data. And that's how it started all with AI, and I moved to data science and then moved to machine learning because I had this passion and because I had this foundation I built over the years. So again, AI started a while back when I was a young boy, but it continues to be my passion and something I enjoy every day.
All right, thank you. And next, Roy, could you tell us about your background?
Yeah, for sure. So around 2012, probably, I started to work in consultancy, doing a lot of, did a lot of computer vision. Then I did my PhD in electrical engineering, focusing on computer vision, AI, published several papers, and collected around 400 citations for my publications till now. And since 2018, I founded BeyondMinds together with others. And since then, in the last 2 years, I'm helping tens of companies to bring AI to production. That's what I'm doing for a living.
Living the dream. Okay. And finally, Manuel, how did you start in this journey?
Thanks. Well, I think it was around, by now 21 years ago when I started in applied AI research, actually in physics, making sense of large amounts of sensor data to reveal some of the underlying principles of nature. But as always, I would say in research, the state of technology is never good enough. So I was fortunate to work in an R&D setting at the forefront of advancing high performance computing systems, and then sort of AI algorithms running then on these systems, and then building distributed cognitive applications then on top. I think later on that I would say deep technical knowledge that I acquired over all these years was quite useful then when I started working as an advisor for digital transformation projects that had the aim to scale AI use cases in businesses. So also rather diverse background.
Okay, I used to report on data centers, so especially interested in this sort of like infrastructure. So that's I'm gonna have a couple questions about that. Yes, if we can start with John. So, yeah, we talked a little bit about this before, but talking about the future, like some people talk about, like science fiction, like fantastical things that we're going to have in 5 years, but how can you successfully reuse the assets you already have? So can you make your existing infrastructure, like last for the next 3 to 5 years, and specifically when we're talking about finance?
Well, certainly that's a great question. If you look back just 2, 3, 5 years in the past, and you can see that most of the companies were very reluctant when it came to AI and AI adoption, right? So companies were reluctant for multiple reasons. First of all, getting to explore the AI was very expensive. You required a lot of skills that at that time were very scarce. You couldn't find really data scientists. You required a lot of infrastructure, and you required a lot of technologies to support all of these initiatives. So because of that, companies invested a lot of money in infrastructure. And these investments came up in a time when they were exploring cloud and exploring how these technologies can be accelerated by adopting cloud. Unfortunately, companies are still reluctant when it comes to data security, when it comes to moving information into the cloud because of good reasons. But on the other hand, they also have to look into the future and see how their companies can actually become more nimble and more to accelerate the adoption of AI. Now, when it comes to technology and the investment, specifically to address your question, it is always important to look into see what current technologies will offer and what future technologies will offer, and have a clear assessment about what can be done. And let me give you some examples. For example, if you're dealing with models and data in general, now companies have proper solutions to anonymize the data and move the data into the cloud for specific training of the model, and move back and maintain the models on-prem. That way, we can secure the current infrastructure, which are not scalable, are not expandable, easier, and maintain the usability of these platforms that we paid already for while we use the cloud in a meaningful way. On the other hand, we have to look at the resources that we have, right? Resources are so important, and upskilling or reskilling takes a lot of money. Moving into cloud directly will put the companies in a kind of risky place. How do you train quickly employees on new technologies, and how do you ensure that this migration from the on-prem into cloud stays in place? So that's why it's really important to look at the skills, look at the value that we have right now, and try to figure out ways to reuse it. For example, we have a lot of BI guys that are good at math, good at statistics. They're not yet data scientists, but they are good in SQL and some of them in Python. Well, there are technologies right now that can be used on-prem, so we can actually enable these employees and deliver valuable solutions and deliver value for the business by reusing current technologies. And that also gives an opportunity for a long-term movement into the cloud, which of course, it's something that most of the companies are looking forward as soon as they figure out the security problem and safetyness of the data and so on. So again, having this kind of assessment and fully understanding the costs and the benefits for maintaining and reusing current technologies without jumping straight into the cloud, that will certainly save a lot of money and will make a smoother transition for the company, which usually end up to be the right way for most of the companies.
Okay. Does anybody have anything to add? Guys, feel free to chime in at any point. But yes, did you have any like thoughts about this, like debate about in-house versus, in the cloud, and how it's going to look over the next 3 to 5? Because, of course, an example of sort of like a technology which remains in banking, and I'm sure like many of you are familiar with mainframes, right? And mainframes have been there, like at the core of banking for what, like 50 years, maybe more, and they still remain there. And it's exactly the same situation, like skills in short supply, like and languages like COBOL. And so it's interesting how in the banking industry in particular, this desire to kind of make what you have last for longer is especially strong. All right. I think we can move to our next question. And this one is a proper prediction question. We're at the end of the year here. So what is one problem that is not currently being solved using AI that you would like to be solved using AI? And this applies to banking, right? So is there a process or an inefficient service, or what would you like to be solved? But again, that we're still not doing. Okay, and then yeah, anybody sort of like, yeah, I don't have a specific speaker.
Well, I would like to kick in with something that I feel financial industry specifically kind of needs to do a better job. And that is fairness and bias in our decision when using AI. I strongly believe that we have so many examples. And again, primarily in finance, because I'm talking about decisions that now are made by our machine learning algorithms. And also IT technology people, they have similar problems in hiring. They use models now to select the right individuals. And unfortunately, everything starts with the biased data. And starts with the data and then goes into the models. And I strongly believe that over the next few years, we must figure out how to fix the fairness and the bias problems, because otherwise the government is already looking into creating the more regulation around this area. And without providing the solutions, the companies, especially in the finance industry, they may face a lot of challenges.
Yeah, John, I think you're noting really interesting comments there. And I think bias and bias mitigation, if you want the algorithmic part of it, can be definitely solved while we speak. And I think AI has the opportunity to bring much more fair and unbiased solutions and mechanisms than human usually will do. You mentioned that the problem starts with the data, and the problem starts with people that annotate the data and got decisions that are biased. And with AI, if you are developing right and take into consideration the bias factors, I think we will see, and we have noticed this in the past many times within our developments, that you are able to outperform people in terms of bias. It's just a question of how to test it. Now, if you will test it versus individual, only one, you will struggle. But if you will check human agreement, take 5 different people, give them to get a decision, you will see that the AI, the machine, will have better agreement with the majority. So that's on one hand. And I really like the term segment of one. Look at data at the individual level versus segmenting, putting people into buckets, which is what rule-based systems are doing. This is what underwriters or credit scores analysis processes are being done for years. And segmenting till today, it's probably one of the core factors of finance. And that should be changed to segment of one approach. And that AI is really promising on that area, for sure.
All right, thank you. Manuel, what problem do you see in banking and finance that is not perhaps being solved using AI, or AI is being misapplied, and that you would like to see solved in the future?
Well, I think on the responsible AI side, I mean, what we just heard, I mean, I can only underline, but I find the question quite interesting because, usually we think about problems that we know AI could, potentially solve, and then we work on how actually we can make it even happen. But personally, I mean, if you ask, well, what cannot be solved by AI currently is, then we may want to look at actually, think about use cases that we cannot even imagine with the current state of computing. So concretely, I mean, if you're looking at the latest progress in quantum computing and quantum machine learning or AI, I mean, it's sort of clear that that this new frontier or this new era of computing is really approaching. And that will most likely bring unprecedented opportunities. But that technology alone won't give you, access to its full potential or breadth of opportunities just for free. I mean, after all, it's what you make out of it, right? And what use cases we come up with. Or even, the way how you would formulate a problem in a quantum context may already lead to, new use cases we cannot even imagine. So I think, in other words, what I would like AI as to help us is actually with coming up with new problems, or use cases to solve, which may, be of intermediate nature, to achieve a target or a particular overarching goal that is defined by humans, or in an organizational context could be a business strategy. And we're sort of asking for what do we have to do to in a staggered setting to reach it.
Thank you. All right, and finally, Adri. Yes, same question. What problem would you like to be solved with AI?
Yeah, so underline all the prior points on responsible AI, or you call it risk management of AI. We have programmed there, so it's essentially to support AI ML to be successful in an organization. I think the key areas of maybe one area would be, how AI ML can help in some big, large societal problems. So if you think about climate change, if you really believe in that, can you really use AI with a combination of climate change, strategic intents, and financing, renewable energy, alternative energy financing using AI and large scale? Maybe that's possible using geospatial data, sort of different sort of credit mechanisms. And if AI can be used for that, that would be a worthy endeavor, which is probably, I haven't seen a combination, which is big, tall order from a global scale, but it will have impact, large impact.
Yes, of course. And we're talking about predictions here. So AI is very much predicted to have a great impact on sustainability, but it hasn't happened yet. Yes, okay, moving on. Like AI projects are currently, they've done proof of concept, like the first trials, and right now, I think the next year we can agree, or the next couple of years are going to be all about scaling up what you have developed in the past couple of years, right? So how do we make AI agile and we do it at scale, because AI models are, notoriously brittle, like the idea of taking something from the data science kind of, like working bench and putting it into production is also, there's lots of hurdles there. So do you think we can achieve this? Do you think, like we can apply some of the things, people learned in DevOps and we can just plug it into machine learning, or is that a little bit too much to ask? So I think we could start with Roy.
Yeah, perfect. So I think it's a super interesting question. And we're working on exactly what you just mentioned in the last 2 years, how to make AI development fast, scalable, and how to meet production-grade solutions while doing that, how to break these barriers of adoption and bring the AI into the real world to solve real problems. My first rule is don't jump into solving problems with your data science team. Invest heavily in fundamentals. You need many different building blocks to compose an AI systems that can actually deliver. A single trained AI model is not what you need in production. I don't know, take anti-money laundering solutions, for example. It's a combination between different alerting systems, how to process the data, how to deal with noisy data, how to build human-in-the-loop environment, how to estimate the uncertainty of the models, what to alert to humans, what not, how to combine the supervised solution with anomaly detection, unsupervised solution into a holistic problem, and many other different complex building blocks that you need in place in production grade in order to solve the problem. So it's not about building a classifier, fraud or not fraud. It's about building complex AI systems. And if you have all the fundamental building blocks in place, you will be able to solve problems fast and deliver. So that's my number one rule: shift the paradigm from AI model to AI systems.
Yes, yes. And of course, financial organizations are more likely, like to have in-house teams and to develop their own products rather than just buying something off the shelf, right? Okay, Adri, do you have anything to add? Like how do you think this is a noble goal, making AI models agile, and how can we get there?
A good question. So quick answer, because I think Manuel and John will have points. So if you're trying to accelerate, and to me, agile or DevOps helps accelerate value, delivery, and outcome, right? So for ML AI, I mean, you have to take good ideas from DevOps, and there are ideas and words called MLOps. To me, it is essentially how do you orchestrate a paradigm that lets you experiment quickly and then move that experiment to production. So that's one. The second one is the data and organizational context. So in some cases, the access to data is very important. So what controls you've got to access to data. You can use artificial data through to real data. So it is a strategic imperative. You are going to only accelerate once you've failed or you've learned from other people's success. And let's be honest, enterprise AI is still new. I've been doing this for a couple of years now. Every time you think you're doing it correctly, you realize after a few years you did it differently and wrong. So anyway, that's my point.
Well,
all right, thank you, John. Yeah, sorry.
I have a a little bit different perspective. I've been delivering scalable AI solutions and acceleration of the scalable AI solutions, and I strongly believe in the concept of. I think it's something related to what Roey said earlier, centralized governance, where we can put in place the right principle, policies, and practices, and then decentralized empowerment, which means that building cross-functional teams that are guided by a product owner that requires a solution either for an idea or a problem. And then in that specific pod or team group of cross-functional employees, we can actually get to that scalable AI by having well-defined, as Roey mentioned, having these containerized, modularized solutions that can be easily reused within those pods and have deliver quick and reliable solutions for the business, and of course, with the business value in mind. So having this framework of delivering scalable AI, it proves to be very valuable for the companies, because not only that enables, data science, it's a science which requires usually a lot of exploration. And when you're telling a data scientist you have to finish a project in 3 months, in average, that's good. They're going to look at you, hey, what are you talking about? We need maybe 3 months just to look at the data. How do you do in 3 months? Well, that is possible because data scientists should be helped with the right technologies and the right standards that can actually help them to quickly move through whatever exists already in the shop, reuse whatever is already tested in production and it knows it works. And then innovation should come as a next stage. Once we put a product in production, the business can use it. Of course, getting newer and better models, it's always an important solution, but that should come in phases. We want the business to have already a product on the market. We want the business to get the benefit of being the first on the market against our competition, so they can see the results, and then improving an existing model and getting better solutions. That will take time, but in the meantime, the business learns and knows what else they want to improve. So again, that's the way that I think is the most effective way from my perspective. Centralized governance, building those modularized components that can be reused, and then decentralize the empowerment and bring the knowledge in those cross-functional teams, nimble teams of up to 10 people, so they can reuse them quickly and bring value for the business.
Okay, thank you. No, so it's basically as much as an organizational question as a question of technology, because people think AI, just chuck money at it, chuck technology at it, and it's going to happen, right? Okay, thank you. Manuel, do you have anything to add about agility?
What John just said, I mean, I can completely underline, and from my own experience, I think this is absolutely the right approach. And I mean, agile, you hear, it became, I think, over the past years, really a buzzword. And I think what we really need to make transparent to those that imagine, agile methodologies, such as the Scrum model, can be, one-to-one applied everywhere in the organization. That is, at least, for data science, in my opinion, a big misconception. Why? I mean, we already heard it, because classical software engineering and DevOps are fundamentally different to the kind of software that we are trying to build with AI, right? So in a classical setting, we are giving explicit instructions to the computer, right? So we have a clear expectation of what our code should do and what it shouldn't. But in an AI context, it's more like, what some people call like software 2.0 now. We are giving implicit, right, instructions to the computer. So in other words, we're kind of giving the constraints or the targets with it, but we kind of let the computer sort of, write the actual code to solve the problem itself. And this self-writing depends on obviously data and statistical learning, and, is that it brings uncertainty into the whole process, and that doesn't fit well, at least not with this one-to-one approach, if you think about the classical methodologies. So I think we can certainly take some of the things out that we know and that we learn from DevOps and these agile methodologies, but we certainly have to adapt it to make it work in an ML context. And I think there isn't a blueprint that you can one-to-one attach to your company. And that's why I think what John said, having cross-functional teams looking for building, modular analytical assets that you can reuse across use cases is very critical.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and the next question is less about predictions and more about the past. So, making predictions is a risky game because all sorts of things might happen in the new year. For example, we met at the AI Summit New York last time in November 2019, just before the pandemic hit. Had no idea it's going to happen, right? And we probably couldn't have predicted many of the industrial shifts that would take place the following year. So I just wanted to ask you, what has been, do you think, the most interesting shift caused by the pandemic in the finance industry? And probably as far as it sort of involves AI, so do you think it accelerated the shift, like the digital transformation shift and the shift to AI-based systems, or it would have happened anyway? So yeah, happy to hear your thoughts. And I guess, can we start with Manuel this time?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you already said it. I mean, I would also put it in one word. I think it's speed or acceleration, of digital transformation needs and the growth of customer demand in digital services across all age groups. And I think most organizations, were already on track on their digital transformation journey before COVID. But this pandemic certainly resulted in this sudden acceleration of that demand, of that transformation journey you're already on. So, maybe also another shift, I think, is the way how we work and interact with each other. I think this was very interesting to see how that worked out, and thinking about also the home office enablement had actually turned out to be improving productivity. And even the image, of home office itself, as it got kind of also rebranded and got more of a positive image, and is across industries. So I think there were many things that obviously we wouldn't have expected. I think things are much faster in terms of the digital journees that we're on and this transformation progress as we're on. And I think it kind of helped also for AI playing a role in all of that we can foster investments in that technology and really urge the need to scale it in order to deliver digital services at scale.
Yes, thank you. John, any observations on the past year?
Well, certainly nobody thought that this could happen, or if somebody thought it would, nobody believe it's going to happen now or to us, right? Maybe next generation, and it did happen. And I cannot agree more with Manuel about reaction. Most, if not all companies had showed that they have the capabilities to move entirely in a digital world when it comes to engagement, partnership, and communication, right? So everybody's working from home. That's something that most companies didn't believe they can actually achieve, right? And they achieve it actually in a matter of weeks, or many times less than 2 months, right? So that's a major shift to the way that we operate as businesses. And it certainly had a major impact on the way we deal with our customers. Digitization, it really speed up. And I like Emmanuel's word speed. I want to use it. I totally agree with him. That's exactly what happened. Everything speed up when it comes to using technology for doing business, using technology for the operating model. But more importantly, you can see that now most, if not all, the businesses have a way to sell or to engage with the customers in a virtual world, right? So that's a major shift.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Adri, yes. Do you have, and does anybody have a comment on the sort of like on the arrival of chatbots? Because they were generally quite maligned. Like nobody wanted to talk to them. But after like over the course of the pandemic, well, we're kind of forced to do it. We're trying to minimize contact, and I think the positions have changed a little bit. Do you think that's the case, or like do you have any other interesting applications that you've seen, Adri?
In the case of AI ML chatbots, yes, I think chatbots it's been used obviously more, not for BNP Paribas, just on the context of that. If my role is looking into digital risk using analytics, data science, and then the other function is across AI. Both areas has different maturity across the group. We've got 200,000 people globally, so you can imagine mobilizing that sort of. We've got 150 or so companies. It's difficult, but the maturity of some organizations within the group were, they were digital bank. They were, completely maybe on cloud. Some were, not so much. It's different. On the use of chatbots, my observation is more internal use. But if you think quite across the industry, once a customer, you earn a customer, you acquire a customer, most of your interaction is to some extent through, IVR or virtual mechanisms. So chatbot is really helpful to that, but we are using it internally as well a lot. So definitely it's helpful. Yeah.
That is interesting. Okay, because we're an AI publication. We don't actually use any AI, and it's horrible. Okay, Roy, any observations on the past year and the major shifts?
Yeah, for sure. So one comment about chatbots before I'm jumping there. On my personal point of view, I think that chatbots don't bring value to the business. I think companies implement chatbots because everybody has chatbots. I don't think it's give value. On the other hand, I think there are many different customer engagement and front office use cases where AI can automate. Think about, email automation, right? You have tons of emails coming into the bank, into the institute, and you want to respond fast with the right information, with the right knowledge, with the right form. That can be amazingly automated on a very personalized level. And we don't need all the fuss about conversational AI and replacing human. AI is not about replacing human at this stage, at least. I think it's about making the employees' work more important, remove these repetitive, labor-intensive tasks from employees, allow them to focus on the mission-critical, last-mile decision-making, enhance that with decision support tools. This is the real value of AI around operation, around dealing with sensitive data, fast data, aggregating of lots of information. So I think that's where companies and organization and enterprises should focus and should put their money into AI. One last comment that I had regarding the maybe the previous, but it's also related to this. I think it's, you have a pandemic, you need to move fast. It's also relevant to agile, right? How can you implement a solution within 2-3 months in production? I would claim that, although you said that a financial institute like to develop in-house, I think that should be revisited. What is the external vendor strategy? How to collaborate internal and external information. And the case of AI is quite unique on this area. It's not like buying a software. Off-the-shelf solution won't solve your unique problem. You have your own data, your own constraints, your own needs. It's not something that you just buy off the shelf. And that's enhanced a new kind of models, new kind of companies, new kind of fintechs that works with the financial sector in order to bring the value, definitely around AI.
Thank you. All right. We're probably gonna skip the funny question, but we can go. I have a question here to Roy. So, and this is for everyone really, but like because we're coming to the end of the show, and the important question is, different reports from a bunch of people, Gartner, MIT Sloan, BCG, suggest that only 1 in 8 AI projects reach production, and 1 in 10 achieve profitability. So what do you think are the main barriers, and what is holding the industry back, and how do we solve it over the next 3 to 5 years? Like how do we get successful AI projects? How do we improve the statistic, which is god awful, to be honest?
Yeah.
Okay. So
the statistics is awful.
Okay, Roy. If you could kick off on this. So how do you think we make AI profitable again?
Yeah, so I think, evidently AI is an amazing tool, right? If it succeeds to reach production and succeed to really deliver, it can bring tremendous large value. But the problem is how to move from a POC environment from the lab into production environment. And there is a huge difference between the two. So my first rule of thumb on that: don't do POCs, go to production, because POCs is a trap. It doesn't really show you or predict. You talked about predicting. It doesn't predict what's going on in reality. Now, the real environment, the data is complex. It's very dynamic, changing environment. It's so dependent on the data. The data change all the time. You have limited amount of labeled data, lots of noise. You need to manage and monitor and maintain the solutions. All these problems need to be very closed loop solved and build before you're reaching into production grade, right? You need to be able to clean the data and build confidence estimation that I mentioned, be able to detect shift in the data, right? By different monitoring tools, governance of what's going on. So if you have all these building blocks and you're building AI systems, you will be able to deliver and fast and reach value. That's the goal.
Thank you. You are full of controversial opinions. Chatbots don't work. POCs shouldn't be done. Okay, John, yes. So do you have anything to respond to that? And yes, generally, why do you think the statistics are so grim?
I think there are 2 barriers that I'm seeing when it comes to the AI, like pretty much any other software, but AI and data science, it's a little bit even more challenging, as Roy explained. I totally agree with him. I would say do POCs in production. Don't do POC because obviously you need a POC, but it has to be done in production because the data is different and changes so quickly. But the 2 barriers I'm seeing is the one that I think the wrong operating model, as Manuel and I were talking earlier about agile methodology on cross-functional teams. that actually puts the product owner on the center. So meaning that whatever is built, the product owner is accountable for, one, identifying the real problem or idea, and second, making use of it once it's over. So that's one barrier if you don't use the right operating model. The second one is if the problem doesn't come from the business. Many times data scientists, they think they have a great idea. They start working on an awesome solution, but actually it's something that doesn't meet some requirements or regulations or needs, right? So then the business is not going to use it. So having such innovative ideas, they must be done through the right operating model, because bringing together the product owner with the compliance people, with risk people, with everybody in the same cross-functional team, it really gets the success rate significantly higher than if you don't go through the cross-functional team. So I think that's pretty much the solution. A scalable AI, it's possible only by blending the business with technology, with data science, with compliance, with risk, all together to make a successful product. It's not enough just to have a good prediction. It's also important to make sure that it follows the regulations, follows the compliance and risk, and all the stakeholders must be involved.
Absolutely, and there's only going to be more regulation, so we can look forward to that. All right, if we can hear from Adri, yes. So what would be your one advice to people, like embarking on their first steps with AI and ML, and yeah, should they do a POC or not, and how should they do it?
So I was in consulting before, so I would say POC, yes. We see literally hundreds of AI projects across the group. I think what John is saying makes total sense. Roy's suggestion on don't do POCs in production, I didn't understand what it means, but I guess we'll discuss later. The point here is, it is the John's point on our central product owner who is responsible totally makes sense. And how we are doing it is we've got a strategic imperative, which is across legal, compliance, risk, IT. So that we have vested momentum towards that. Sometimes it's not possible realistic. So for some projects, we do POCs. We try to see whether the intention, the strategic intent of the small team makes sense. If it's successful based on the experiment, then we move it to production. Unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't. So there is a disparity. But at the leadership point, there has to be strong conviction that data science, AI, ML can bring value. Measurable value. If that's not there, then you will sort of cull off the project very soon. Then finding the goal. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you. And Manuel, yes. So first, obviously, position the POCs, and then yes, how to improve the survival rate for AI projects.
Well, without repeating, what was already said, I think. Another angle is, looking at AI as it's a new technology, right? But in order for, any technology to scale in an organization, to be actually used in, business processes and, thus made directly exposed to business impact and revenue pools, it requires some level of trust. But trust, is nothing else than reliability over time. And AI hasn't been there for long, and in most businesses, that most people actually really get stuck in proof of concept black holes, you can call them, right? So building really up trustworthy AI in the organization, I think is one of the enablers and one of the things that you really need to do. And one thing, is you need to have the right organizational structure. You need to think about some AI governance that really has senior management involvement. You need technical and algorithmic controls to build transparency, to assign accountability, to identify systematically, also mitigate unwanted bias, as we discussed also before, both in data and in models. And then, to also build assurance of that these controls actually fulfill also then, the regulatory and ethical standards and so on. With all of that, you're moving AI into something that people more trust, and then also are more willing to actually have them part of the core of an organization, and then generate business impact. And I think this is a long journey, and I think we're only in the beginning here.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for mentioning, yes, trust in AI. It's certainly a big issue, and we sort of like we discussed it before, and we're going to return to it again. But yes, I'm afraid this is everything we have time for today. So thank you very much, gentlemen. This has been educational, very entertaining, and certainly you know like fantastic to hear from you all. And it's quite a big brain jar we've built here. So thank you very much, and enjoy the show.